seeking, that I came to the conclusion that to postpone this decision and put it in the hands of people who perhaps were not familiar with the college, certainly would not have had experience on the board, that this was too important a decision to delay it. I remember well the conversations we had at our retreat. I remember well the recommendation from our leader, and for me, it's a cop. For me, if I don't participate in this, I am not fulfilling my duty as a trustee for the next 6 months. That's it.
Looks like, Mr. Johnson, are you trying to raise your hand?
Marilyn, I also remember the conversation we had there at the retreat. But with that said, we all know that the world has sort of turned upside down in the past few weeks. And I know even from a perspective with the city of Monterey, how much energy and concern we're putting forward into the recovery. And that's really the reason I'm very interested in us moving this this up sooner, because I want us to be in place for the recovery. And I strongly feel it's going to be somewhat chaotic when that happens. And if we could have this very important issue taken care of now, and I would add that I'm hearing things from faculty members that have contacted me and people in town who love MPC and are interested in it. And I'm hoping that we can move forward with a much sooner solution to this.
Thank you. Is there any other trustee that would like to make a comment at this time?
I can.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I can say that I agree. I'm not sure the consensus was all that ironclad when we came up with that consensus in the context of that retreat. And I agree that this is an important decision, and it's probably wise to get it if we have enough information about how to about what to do. I think the time to act is later. So I agree with the two previous comments.
Great. All right. I see that student trustee Mountain has his hand up. If you want to go ahead, Robert.
Sure. Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So the Student Council has discussed this now twice and has a recommendation for the board. And the recommendation is that because this is such an important decision and because this is such a turbulent time, that the full time be allowed to make the decision in calmer and cooler times. It seems to me that there's a lot of emotion swirling around our community, and many of the factors that will bear on this very important decision will not become apparent for many months, and that a better decision can be made if the entire process, as it was outlined in the offsite, be allowed to happen.
Thank you. So it looks like Rick would like to respond to that. Go ahead, Rick.
two things. One is I'd be really interested in the conversation that the student council had, seeing not just a quick synopsis, but perhaps more in depth. But more than that, because I don't think it's something we need to jump on immediately, I'd like to know if this academic senate would have some input into this. And then my last question, and I really will let people talk, is my understanding was when we had the failed search before, that company that we hired would go forward with another search at no cost to us. And I want to know, one, if that remains true, if there's a time limit on that. And I think as far as the emotional question to this, I think that there's a lot of people emotionally that are also concerned that we perhaps would not have leadership once we come through with this if our current interim superintendent was offered a position somewhere else, because other schools will be looking to solve these problems too. Those are my ideas.
So before we ask if there's anybody from the, I see you, Robert, I'm going to let you respond. Before we see if there's any from the academic senate to respond from a senate perspective, let Robert respond to the question regarding a more further explanation of the conversation of the ASMPC. And then maybe after that, Sean, if you could weigh in or provide some information related to any of the details on the consulting contract, whether that be Sean or Joe Reen, that would be appreciated.
So Rick, I'd be happy to give you any details you want that you think is missing. What would you like to know about the discussion? There were two separate discussions and their character was quite different. And I can go on at any length.
I don't think we have to go in length, but one, I think probably one of the easier ones would be how many people participated in that discussion.
About 18 on the first
Wow.
one. And I would say, well, there were 16 people at the meeting today, and I would say of the 16, perhaps 8 participate. Well, no, about 10 participated. The focus of today's discussion really didn't have to do with time frame, though. It had to do with criteria for selection, which isn't exactly what we're talking about now.
Isn't at that,
Is that
a discussion to delay it?
well, not delay it. I mean, at least the way I laid it out to the student council, and I thought correctly that the plan was that it would be a significant number of months. I think I said 18 or 20, and there is a feeling on the part of some board members that ought to be accelerated, and I thought that was a fair characterization, and in the first meeting, it was pretty clear that after a lot of questions and going back and forth, it seemed to me the consensus of the student council was this is very important, and one ought to take one's time, one ought to evaluate it over time, and that a longer period of time was appropriate.
So I'll just respond to that, Robert. My understanding and where I'm coming from in this discussion, not sure who has that feedback, is that in either scenario, the process would take approximately 5 months to implement from start to finish. The question would be that we were kind of kicking back and forth was, do we initiate a process by which the entire 5 months is completed by the current Board of Trustees, or would we initiate a process that was initiated by this board and then completed by whoever the board is that would be seated after November 2020? Because as we know, at least 2 of our board members are not likely to seek re-election. And then we have the district or the trustee area, 1 seat that needs to be have a re-election done, and then also trustee area, I think 5 is up for re-election. So there's potential for significant turnover on this board come November. And so our conversation was, do we want it to be completed by this current board, or would we like to start it and then allow the board that's in place in November complete it? Both from a perspective of that board having leadership and being responsible for the supervision and the direction to that superintendent president, and also making sure that whomever our candidates were recognized that as a district, we're in a place of uncertainty with the board they'd be working on, and thinking that might be a consideration for the candidate, which is where we had kind of come to the general consensus that that's outlined in the notes that Sean sent to us. This board would initiate and then do a handoff to the future board. But what I understand the conversation to be today, and Marilyn, make sure, give me a big nod if I'm understanding correctly, the conversation today is, do we initiate that complete process, which takes approximately 5 months, as soon as possible, so that it is completed before the new board is seated in November, so that there is a certainty of leadership for that board moving forward? And Marilyn, that's correct. Big nod for the
What you just said. I am supportive of what you just said, that it would be this board who has experience at looking at college presidents, who has experience at working within the community college system, that this board use the responsibility that it was entrusted with to select a new leader before we change, before the November election.
So before, Robert, we go to you, I just wanted to check in with Rosalind to see if you had anything you wanted to contribute to the conversation at this point.
So I understand it from all the angles. I don't want to necessarily come from my own person, because I want to represent the communities that we were selected to serve. And the students are a part of our community, so their voice is very important to me as well in this process. But I also agree with Rick in maybe being able to, to allow them space to unpack more of, where they are coming from and how their decision process is coming to fruition. So I'm kind of, stuck in the middle of this conversation with a great understanding on both ends, both from Marilyn, Rick, and Robert.
So Robert, go ahead, you're unmuted.
Well, I was trying to recreate in my mind the arguments that Marilyn and I believe Lauren made at the offsite against moving it up. And as and please, these were your arguments. So if I'm mischaracterizing them, please correct me. But my recollection is that the reluctance, your reluctance then in moving it up was that you didn't want to kind of hand the new board a fait accompli. that they ought to have the duty, the responsibility, and the privilege of selecting the person who they were going to be working with to cement buy-in and make sure that that person's vision was congruent with their own. Am I remembering that correctly, Marilyn and Lauren?
There were certainly two sides of the issue. And I know from my standpoint, I listened to what our leader said that day, and I tried to be respectful of her experience and her recommendation. I have to tell you, over the last, whatever it's been, month, since we had that discussion, I've come back to my original position, which was we need to do it before the election in November. And so I've come back to my original, it's what I had wanted to see 6 months ago when we first all came together right after Rosalind was elected. I thought, now we have a complete board, let's move forward on this. And I tried to keep an open mind when I went into the discussions we had at the retreat, but I have to tell you, I have come back to my original position and have not wavered that I think it is the duty of this board to do before we leave. When Rick and I were first elected, Robert, we had been seated for exactly 1 month when the superintendent announced that he was retiring. And I don't want to put words in Rick's mouth, but for myself, I thought that was a horrible thing to do to a new board because we did not have the experience at looking at this from years of being familiar with it, even though both Rick and I were very familiar with the college and had a great affinity for the college. I know I felt absolutely overwhelmed, and I felt it was an overwhelming burden to have to do and take on early. Now, there is a benefit from working together. There is a benefit as a board. There is a benefit from building cohesion. All of that takes time. All of that takes time. And I know Rick and I both came in onto the board with a commitment to work in cooperation and well with the others. And so we move things forward. But I tell you, I am absolutely firmly convinced, and the people that I have talked to in the community, they think it is the responsibility of this board to do it.
Thank you,
That's
Marilyn. Lauren, did you have anything you wanted to say on that?
Sure. Am I unmuted? I guess I am. A couple things. So either way, it's a 5-month process. So it's not really a 20-month process, which is the way I think Robert was thinking of this thing, or it could be a 20-month process. It's a quick process either way. On the issue of who should choose the president, it's kind of like what we just went through a couple years ago regarding Merrick Garland and Neil Gorsuch, the two Supreme Court nominees. You may recall them. The senior senator from Kentucky was of the opinion that the people ought to select the president before the decision was made about which Supreme Court justice to appoint. And we don't have to go very far into that, but you can see the similarity, the metaphorical similarity between having the old president select the Supreme Court justice and the new president select the Supreme Court justice. So there's that kind of issue. And on that issue, I kind of fell on the side of Neil Gorsuch rather than, what am I saying? On Merrick Garland, sorry, rather than Neil Gorsuch. Gorsuch was Mr. Trump's nominee, and Garland was the, I'm right about that, right? Yes, Garland was the Obama nominee. I also want to say that the normal time for doing an interim is a 1-year period. It's not a 2-year period, it's a 1-year period. And by characterizing this as an acceleration of the thing kind of misconstrues the fact that we're kind of going back to what the norm would be, and what is pretty much almost always the case everywhere. It's rare to have a 2-year interim appointment made. We did it, but that doesn't mean we have to adhere to that. And it's pretty normal to do a 1-year appointment. In fact, I think it's, if anything, pretty out of the ordinary to not do a 1-year appointment. Yeah, so anyway, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that no matter what, whenever somebody comes new to our positions, to the board, there will be a sitting president, whether that person is an interim or otherwise. And it's, as Marilyn says, it's asking a lot to have a new person come in. I don't know that I would have shied away from that challenge when I came in. I didn't have that challenge, so I didn't have to worry about it. But no matter what, everybody comes in with the sitting president, whether he's interim or not. So I don't know that people coming in excited about the possibility of selecting a new president is the right way of thinking about it, from my perspective. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but in the absence of thinking through this ahead of time, that's pretty much, I think, what I have at the moment.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm going to turn to Rick.
Thank you. You saw the hand going up and down. Maybe there's some common ground here. If my concern is we start the process now, and if that process can be completed by the end of November, that's terrific. If it can't, then of course it'll have to go on to the new board. But to sit and wait for this to happen concerns me greatly. So I would like to see the process begin. I'd like to see us try to wrap it up by November. We don't know who will be applying. Certainly David, we think will, but there may be others. So if we can start this process, if we end up having to turn it over, that's what happens with election cycles, and we'll live with that. But could we start this now at the beginning of May, having student representation? I have to ask Lauren, I don't remember a lot of student representation when we move forward, either when we hired Walt or in the last search. But we include the students, but we don't prolong this just for that reason. The reason being that we think the new board should make that decision.
Okay.
Did any of that make any sense, Yuri?
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so Sean let me know that she doesn't have the information about the consultant agreement, and that was a question that came up. I don't know if Joreen, if you have that information. Go ahead, Joreen.
Yes, there isn't, I didn't look, I looked at their contract for CCS, and I did not see a clause where if it was a failed search, that it would be like no expense. Yeah, I didn't see that clause in there. Yes, Lauren?
Okay. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, thanks. There is an expectation that if there's a failed search, and this is true for every search contract, if it doesn't work, if it's a failed search, then the consultants always agree to do it again for free for a period of time. Usually that period of time is 1 year, and that's because they figured that the new person, usually when a search a search fails more often by a new person who comes in not fitting. And the consultants typically give you a year to figure out whether that person fits in or not. And after that, all bets are off. In our case, we had a failed search, not because we got somebody new who didn't fit in, but we couldn't get anybody. So our current consultant is aware of the situation and understands, knows, expects that we will be utilizing her, should we want to do another search, and it will be free. At least for this year. I haven't talked to her about what happens if we wait until next year to do it. I know that it'll be free this year because that is standard in these kinds of search contracts.
Thank you. Well, I will say that as it's noted in our staff report and discussion, the conversation related to selection of a consultant is one that is on the list of to be done by any ad hoc committee that is formed to engage in this conversation. So it is something we'll need to address. Before I open it to general public comment, I did want to know if there was anybody on the phone or in Zoom from Academic Senate who wanted to provide any comments. There was a trustee who had, I think Mr. Trustee Johnson had indicated an interest in knowing where the Senate, if they had an opinion on this. So if you do, if you could just raise your hand or unmute yourself, *6. All right, not seeing anybody. We will open this for, oh, yes, Lauren, just 1 second.
Sure.
Go ahead, Lauren. Go ahead.
I'm going to say that this doesn't carry the Senate, but I believe we all got an email earlier today from a member of the faculty who may or may not be part of that.
I was just going to have Joreen read any of the public comment we received. Thanks. Joreen, if you could share any public comment we received before the meeting.
Thank you. Yes. We received an email from Georgia Joe Van Dam on April 1st. My name is Georgia Van Dam. I am an adjunct professor in the Humanities Division. In my 42 years of teaching, I have served under 7 community college presidents and 1 CSU president. To me, the most noteworthy president is someone you probably know, Jack Scott, former president of Pasadena City College, who left to become a chancellor of the California Community College and a member of the State Assembly and Senate. We at MPC are lucky to have a president who measures up to Jack Scott's high standards of intellect and public service. In my opinion, David Martin, our present interim president, is an example of the promise and dedication that marked the success of Jack Scott. We are lucky to have him here. Respectfully submitted by Georgia Joe Van Dam. And that was the only one.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that would like to make a comment? If you guys will excuse me 1 minute, I need to explain to my daughter that I'm in a meeting. Sorry, usually I would just let her run in, but I'm not usually chairing the meeting. So was there any member of the public on the phone or in the Zoom that raised their hand or would like to make a comment? All right. I'm not seeing anyone. I will thank Ms. Van Dam for her letter on behalf of the board and note that per Ed Code, we have a statutory requirement to complete an open and fair process. And so we aren't considering any one individual at this time for the position of superintendent president and need to engage in in that process to identify a permanent person for the position. So if there are there other comments from the board before we move to item 3B, which is providing direction to staff on how to proceed? Just raise your hand. Okay, so seeing none, we'll go to the next part of our conversation, which is providing direction on staff on how to proceed with the superintendent president search. There seems to be a general consensus that the board should initiate a process for identifying a permanent superintendent president in the immediate future. And I'm going to actually unmute everyone at this time so we can engage in real-time dialogue. We just ask that we all kind of, raise our hand and wait to be acknowledged before we jump in. Is that general consensus? Do you guys agree with that consensus statement I just made?
Well, what constitutes consensus?
Well, I'm hearing from at least 3 of the board members that they would like to do this process sooner rather than later. And I feel I heard Trustee Green say that she feels that we should move forward as well, which would be 4. Is that, am I correct, Rosalind? Because you said you could see it from both sides.
Yes.
Okay. So I haven't weighed in at this point, and so I will say in these different discussions that we've had, I had went into the initial conversation with the sense that we would initiate a process along the same timeline that had been undertaken when we went out for our failed search, which would have created kind of a crossover between the 2 boards. And then I believe it was Rosalind that brought forward the question of should we accelerate this and begin the process immediately. And thought about it quite a bit between our first and second board retreat, and came to the second board retreat at a place of, I think we should begin this process as long as we do it with fidelity. But then we engaged in a conversation as a board that took us to a place of, I think, trying to honor the changes that will be coming to our district and respecting the new trustees that would be elected to lead this board, and trying to be considerate of an individual that would be coming into a position with a lot of unknowns. And so, got there together with the board and was somewhat taken aback at our last meeting when this came up again, because I do find it troublesome to engage in a conversation, feel like we had reached a conclusion, and then be making a decision all over again. And we've done this a couple of times and on different topics. But am prepared to lead this board forward if it is the will of the board to do so, but knowing that I have a strong sense of respect and expectation that we engage in a thorough and complete process. If we were to do so, that this isn't just a show that we're putting on for anything, but that I think we all respect our duties to the district and to the college. And for me, that is the top of the line, that we would really make efforts to outreach and engage and seek candidates who can lead our district into the future and are prepared to help us continue to transition. So I'm, I guess, prepared to move forward with the rest of the board if that is your will, but am welcome to have other people kind of share their thoughts and opinions if you need to. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really honor what you're saying, Yuri, and I think we need to be aware that there may be some candidate out there that just is so perfect also, whatever. My concern is we start this process as soon as we can and that we move forward with a goal of being able to hand over to a new board at least that continuity that we can, and not put them in that position when we are also recovering from the entire pandemic situation that's affected the school.
So speaking of the pandemic, I don't know if Mr. Hagler or if the director of IT are on the call, but if someone could speak to our technological capabilities of engaging in a distance search process, that would be really helpful to understand. Do we feel like we are able to do that? So I see Steve, I'm going to unmute you and you can tell me if I should unmute someone else. Steve?
Can you repeat that for me?
Just what is our capability as a district to engage in a process that might end up being entirely virtual for search and interview and all that?
I think we are capable. We've all learned to utilize Zoom and these technological features to do things remotely, and that is our new norm.
And I mean, from where I'm sitting in my day job, I do feel like this is our new norm, and that we're not going to be leaving our homes anytime soon. And so we need to be thoughtful about how this environment is going to change what that process would look like. But saying that, I don't know that postponing and starting in November, it would really change that situation either. We're in a long haul situation for how we're going to be interacting in this way as a community, as a nation. So that would be something that we need to make sure is fully fleshed out if we do this.
And what I'm finding, as I'm sure many of the rest of you are, is that actually, in many cases, I know certainly with my children and my grandchildren, I talk to them much more frequently. So what I am suggesting is that having a search process online actually allows more people to see and view what's happening and what's going on.
You're glitching out, Marilyn. Lauren, did I see you raise a hand there? Or were you just, yeah? Hold on just 1 second. Go ahead.
I couldn't hear her either. I couldn't hear Marilyn either, but I also lost Yuri for a period of time there. My whole screen went blank and I had to reconnect. From the perspective of is it doable, there are a number of searches that are currently going on across the state that have all turned 100% virtual. I don't know that anybody's actually made a final decision yet of who they're going to hire through this virtual process, but what the feedback that I have gotten is that it's different, but it's not impossible to do. It may not even be any more difficult to do than the previous way that everybody was doing it. So I don't know that it's something we should talk about for sure, but it's not necessarily something that is a fatal flaw against doing it now. For example, right now, San Mateo College is close to coming up to their final decision, doing all of the latter stages of the process virtually. So
including like town halls and all the different
virtual town halls. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's all being done virtually. It doesn't seem to have created problems for them. There are 6 or 7 districts that I know of that are in the process now, and and certainly it's a daunting question. And from where we're sitting, we have no idea how it would work. But apparently, the consultants in that business are quickly getting up to speed on how to do it.
And I hear you saying we've got a couple of districts that we can lean on to learn some best practices from, or at least glean from their experience as we do it.
That's right.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Rick, let me get you unmuted there, buddy.
Mine is a question.
Mhm.
Does this require um, um,
Vote.
a vote right now? And if it is, I'd like to make that motion.
It's not actually agendized as an action item, and because the first step is the formation of an ad hoc committee, that's something that I, as the chair, have the kind of prerogative to form an ad hoc committee. And it seems that the majority of the board would like to do that. So I would suggest the formation of an ad hoc. We heard in our retreat, potentially 2 board members, and the chair typically sits on it. So if you would be open to it, Marilyn, I would like to suggest that you and I serve as an ad hoc committee to initiate a search process for the superintendent president to begin as soon as possible.
I would be happy to.
Okay.
I would
So
be
in that,
happy to work with you, Yuri, but I don't think you are making a wise decision if you take the person who's involved in the middle of the process out of it. So I agree. It should be, Marilyn is a great person to do it. I'd also serve on it. You can't have 3. I think that the chair typically would not serve on this committee. When I have done it before, I've always made sure I wasn't the chair.
so I appreciate that feedback, but I'm going to go ahead and serve on this committee at this time.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Yuri, can you hear me?
Mhm.
With your saying that, that you're going to serve on it, not just good luck, but thanks. And please feel free to contact any of us for background information, but good for you.
Thank you. So I guess the direction to the staff would be to, if you could schedule a meeting with the ad hoc so we can begin to implement the steps that were outlined in the process, so we can move forward with this. That was a really loud noise. I don't know if that was just on my side. The search. Okay, so seeing no other business, we would be, it says adjourn, but I think we need to recess into closed session meeting. If that's correct. So we'll recess at 2:27. How about we take 10 minutes and then reconvene for our closed session, and then we'll come back at the end of the closed session to do a report out. Yeah.
I think it's 3:27, not 2:27.
Oh, thank you. 3:27. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us this afternoon. I hope you guys are staying safe and that you have an enjoyable weekend. Looks like it might actually be nice, and hopefully you have grass to put your feet in. All right. See you guys in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
For all of you that are still on the line, the meeting has been adjourned and now they will be going into closed session. So you can leave the meeting now. Otherwise, unless you have a public comment on the closed session items.
I'm sorry, Erin, I walked away to turn on the hot water.
That's okay. No, I was just letting everybody else know that they can leave the meeting, that it's been adjourned.
Okay.
The public meeting.
Okay. I'm going to try to come in on my iPad instead of my iPhone because I'm running out of juice.
Okay.
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 So if that doesn't work, I'll be back after.
Okay.
Thank you.
call from Lawrence Hicks.
I'm just hanging out just to make sure that you guys are all good, and then I'm turning everything over to you, okay?
Okay. I just sent you messages. Does David know to join us? I didn't
Yeah.
text him or anything.
Mhm,
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will leave as well. Hi, Yuri.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
I'm sorry I missed our a meeting yesterday, but Jareen caught me up on everything. So
Oh, no worries. It was quick. You changed your clothes. Or
with that,
Rick or Lauren
Rick.
changed his clothes.
Yeah, so you are now the host,
Okay. So we're just waiting for
David.
David. I'm gonna unmute everybody.
Yeah.
See more.
And
Oh, Lord.
I had asked him if he wanted any of the VPs to join, and he didn't say. So,
Okay. Well, I guess we'll call him if we need him.
yeah, they're available and ready if you need them.
Okay. Just waiting for David, and I think Rosalind's there.
I'm here.
Okay. I like Marilyn's room. Very
I know,
cozy.
doesn't that look nice?
Mhm.
I'm stuck in a tiny little guest bedroom with cat food at my feet.
Yuri, are you still going into the office?
No, we got our Wi-Fi set up, so I've been officially
Oh.
working from home since last Thursday now. It was almost easier to be at the office.
For me, it's much easier because I have all my files there. And I'm alone in the building.
Mm-hmm. So you're still going into the office?
So I'm going in for 4 hours a day.
Okay.
And I pulled my retirement and agreed to stay one more year for the recovery.
I told you, I totally told you that you weren't gonna go.
You want to do that? I told you so, just specific. Thank you. But the recovery really is where all our focus is right now.
Yeah,
Mm,
the county hasn't gotten to recovery yet.
Yeah.
You're talking to yourself, Marilyn. Let's see if we can get you so we can hear you.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay, I was going to say, Rick, that's very magnanimous of you to do.
Oh,
It is.
thank you. Thank you.
And
Very.
next we see you, we'll bring you a little crown to wear.
Oh, wow. I would like that. Does it come with chocolate?
King Rick.
Do you say come with chocolate?
I would hope so.
Oh, I hope so too. All right, well, it looks like we're all here. So
Okay, is Rosalind not showing us her picture?
she's not showing us her picture. I can request. that she-
Rosalind, I thought you looked really cute. I like that, your scarf around your head.
It looks like Steve is waiting to get into the meeting. David, does Steve need to be in this meeting with us? Oh, he just left. He left. He's not trying to get in anymore. Okay, I guess Jareen and Sean, I think we're good.
Do you want to do roll call real quick?
There you
Oh,
are. I like Rosalind's scarf around her hair. It's fun.
It is fun.
You have such a pretty face. I like it back off your face.
Okay, so let's see. So we'll call to order the closed session of the April 10th, 2020 Governing Board for the Modern Pennsylvania Community College District at 3:41 p.m. Can we have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Chair Anderson,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Steck,
Here.
Trustee Green, Rosalind,
Unmute her.
Oh,
Thank you. I'm here.
thank you. Trustee Dungussison,
I'm here.
Trustee Johnson,
Here.
Interim Superintendent President David Martin.
Here.
Okay, and we do have 2 people waiting, and we do need to open it up to the public to make comment on our closed session agenda. So I'm going to add it's Steve and Jim Tunney. They should be in. Okay, so we have called to order the board meeting and taken roll, and we're at the point of accepting public comment on closed session items. We have 2, well, conference with legal negotiators, government code section 5495.6. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on any of the items in closed session? All right, seeing none, this board will recess into closed session and take up that item. So I will.
Yuri, it's a question. Do we also allow public